Hello, everyone. So, I wanted to continue my series. What I wanted to discuss is another thought disorder. So, I want to start with schizophrenia, schizoaffective, a schizoform. So, an overview of schizophrenia, it's a common psychosis. It literally means split mind. It was coined in the late 1800s by a Swiss psychologist, Eugene Bueller. I'm trying to right now go off memory before I go into my notes. Yes. Um, it's only 1% of the population actually suffers from schizophrenia. Now, schizophrenia is categorized by two common characteristics, which are positive symptoms and negative symptoms. And you're wondering, okay, how can there be positive and negative symptoms to a disorder? Again, let me explain, and I'll explain why. Now, positive symptoms include delusions, hallucinations, disorganizational speech and thinking. Like you're transient, you're incoherent, your stuff doesn't make sense. It's just words together, and it's just grossly disorganized behavior, difficulty setting goals, unpredictable agitation, silliness, unusual silliness at bizarre times, bizarre and just overall very. I won't say all people that act weird are schizophrenic, but just behavior not to the norm, and catatonic behavior. And catatonic meaning complete flat affect, no emotion. It's literally, I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. Now, when we go into more negative symptoms, are complete flat affect. Okay, was it alagia, which is complete the poverty of speech, which is slowed speech, decreased fluency, and abolition, which is basically abolition. I apologize. Is the complete inability to goal directed behavior. You say, why is this? Isn't this similar to what I just said in positive symptoms? It's more or less categorized within the negative symptoms because these more or less hinder behavior. And we're talking in an aspect where the positive symptoms you can still function within every day. More or less the negative symptoms you cannot function every day to day. So going back to Eugene Bueller, he had four A's that he discussed. Ambivalence. I apologize. Autistic thinking, loosen of associations, so rapid shift of ideas, and affective disturbance. Maybe blunt, flat, inappropriate, but again, I do that sometimes. But again, not in conjunction, again, in conjunction with, again, the positive and negative symptoms as I just previously discussed. Now, there's also four categories of schizophrenia. So I'm going to discuss those. First, paranoid. Paranoid schizophrenic. We hear of that term a lot. It's kind of, I won't say glorified, but it's used very much so in television. Persistent disillusions, auditory, and, well, it's more auditory. Guarded, suspicious, hostile, possibly violent. It's onset later in life. So more than likely you won't get this until, again, if you have schizophrenia, late 20s, maybe even later, maybe even 30s, 40s, if I may. Disorganized type, grossly inappropriate, flat affect, primal, hypochondriac, again, unusual manners, giggling, crying out loud, just, again, one could confuse this with possibly bipolar disorder, where just inappropriate behavior, just crying out loud randomly. But again, this is more disorganized thinking. And again, everything what I'm talking about has to more or less do with thinking. Again, this is early onset. So again, early onset meaning early in life, you get it, you're diagnosed with it, hopefully you can be treated with it. Next is catatonic. So what does catatonic mean? As I stated before, marked by disturbance in the psychomotor activity. So it's just something of that nature. Maybe immobile or, again, excitatory. So psycho excitation, so meaning those twitches, or again, now don't think, even though it says catatonic, and I know what you normally think of catatonic is a state of nothing's there, but it's different definitions to it. And the last is undifferentiated type, which is, again, delusions, hallucinations, incoherence, disorganized speech, behavior. It doesn't fit clearly into one of the three aforementioned. So they said you're just this. And this is, again, according to DSM. So now let's move on. Schizophreniform. It meets the categories of schizophrenia, but the duration is not as long. Usually 1 month, but up to 6. Social occupational function may be impaired versus schizophrenia, which is more of a functional disturbance. So schizophrenia, your hampered relationship, school, yourself, parents is just completely dysfunctional. And in functionality, that's the most important thing with most psychological disorders that you need to know, is that it's categorized at that. Categories within that nature. Next thing, and again, this probably touches a little more home with me because certain family members suffer from it, and this is schizoaffective disorder. Schizoaffective, again, is that split mind, but along with mood disorders as well. So it's not really depression or mania or bipolar, and it's also not just a thought disorder. So it's kind of symptomatic of both. Delusional speech, disorganized speech, major depression, mania. It's mixed. It can last for a 2-week period of psychotic symptoms only. Onset later than schizophrenia. So again, this can happen teens, 20s, 30s, 40s. The prognosis is, once detected, it's manageable with certain medications, but it's you're overall, you have a better prognosis than with schizophrenia. And lastly, most of these people that have schizoaffective disorder is 2 subcategories, which is depressive and bipolar, which is kind of how you can, again, which is mania. That can be defined as that. Now, what I really wanted to talk about, which is the etymology of schizophrenia, with brain regions. Again, it's a lot of brain regions associated with this, because if you think about it, within schizoaffective, it's thought as well as emotions. So it could be the mesolimbic as well as the mesocortical. Again, large ventricles, temporal lobe dysfunction, certain frontal lobe dysfunction, neuronal density, meaning the density of certain dendrites, certain axons, isn't hampered. The major culprit, from what I've, again, studied many times and what researchers found, is that it has to do a great deal with the dopaminergic pathways. So dopamine is the major cause. I think it's the H3D2 type, because it's different types of dopamine, for the record, if you don't know. Certain DAR receptors, it's saturated with these chemicals. Too much can form dysfunction. A lot of people would think you want as much chemicals or dopamine or serotonin is, and I also, doing research earlier, I've learned that serotonin is more or less connected, but it's primarily dopamine. That you, again, if you have dopamine or acetylcholine or whatever it is in your system, that's a good thing. No, it can be a bad thing, because too much of it will saturate the area and it'll stop the work. It'll either just work peculiar or different, or it will, again, cease function. Okay, now the primary structures, the changes in the brain: the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the parahippocampus. So smaller affected areas and certain, they are little. Again, this is dealing with twin studies. These areas are smaller. So how do we treat them? Dopamine blockers. That's really most antipsychotics. They're dopamine blockers. What they do is they get into the bloodstream. You take the drug. It dissolves. It goes to certain regions of the brain where dopamine is. It blocks the receptors, and it blocks the excess of dopamine. So what happens is, again, the drug attaches to the receptor. Upon completion of that, the dopamine that would normally be there, it can't. So it would dissipate, or it would go away, and again, hopefully it'll help regulate the again, that saturation. Yep, like I said, stated before, because I was looking at my notes. Again, it's dopamine 2 receptors. This is what it's antipsychotics. Yes, so looking at it's the nucleus, the patayan, the nigrostratal pathway, which is more or less, and which is the subcutaneal nigra. Again, I apologize. It's been so long since I've had to do this in front of a class. It's more or less the emotional part. Oh, again, and most of these antipsychotics, as well as blocking the dopamine, again, they block as I stated before, the serotonin that was in those regions as well. Those cliffs between the receptor and the axon. That's where all the neurotransmitter is. So again, the receptors come in, they block it, so that it'll again seep out, go out, and again, the body always recycles. Note, the body recycles. So we just use them and take them back in. Thank you. So I wanted to conclude. Why again did I talk about schizophrenia? It does have a close connection to it. Family members do have schizophrenia. See, unlike myself, where I will talk about mine, I'm not going to talk about them directly, but certain members of my family were categorized with schizoaffective disorder. Very difficult times, very difficult on the family, and it took a lot of people to understand. It took a lot, again, on and off medication at times, but again, with schizophrenia, schizoaffective, these people are unpredictable, and in most of the cases, again, a big portion of homeless people, statistical fact, have been at one point. And I'm not saying all, but a big portion of them was categorized with schizophrenia. So it's a very debilitating disease. It's very, without a proper structure or a proper system. Unfortunately, in most cases, it hampers their lives. Okay. So again, I want to thank everyone for listening and watching. I'll have something out soon. Thank you very much.